Third special study session is now called to order. A roll call, Mrs. Bidner.
Mayor Daniels?
Here.
Councilmember Campbell?
Here.
Councilmember Fleming?
Here.
Councilmember Henderson?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem McGinnis? Here. Councilmember Slater?
Here.
Councilmember Teets?
Here.
Quorum present. Mr. Zerly?
Well, thank you, Mayor, members of council, public and city staff. Hopefully, well, I'll have a presentation for you. If not, we'll just go off the handout, but it would be unfortunate for the audience. And so if you bear with me, I'd like to see if we can get this running.
So these two nuns walk into a bar.
Well, I will say that as a city manager, I've worked with 7 mayors and 41 council members, and this is the first time where I have a majority of the governing body that is going through their first budget session. So, understanding that, we'll all take as much time as you need to get through the document. If there's anything that you don't understand, faulty communication is always the fault of the sender. And so after the presentation, we'll clear up any questions that you may have so that you have a zone of comfort when you make decisions. And then, of course, we have an area to take a look at answering questions after each part of the budget.
Mr. Zerly?
Yes.
No one has a budget package except me.
I believe all of council should have one.
They might be in a copy.
Okay.
We don't have one.
You want to check?
Wow.
Actually,
All
I
right.
think staff
Good gift.
has been-
Really, well, staff hasn't. You'll have yours momentarily.
Thank you. Yes. Yes.
You got one way? You.
About 2 more minutes, hopefully.
Nice job, Tom.
We'll see. I'm still working on it.
I'll ask a question, but this.
I'd like to mention that
Appreciate that.
for almost the past 50 years, probably 45 years, there were 2 people that put the budget document together, John Lamorato and Ken Courtney. This is the first year that we've had someone besides those 2 gentlemen put this document together, and Tom, for his first time, did an excellent job for us. It's balanced. There's a couple of what you call, not mistakes, if you will, but we've left a couple things out that are not in this draft that we will talk about to put in our final draft for your approval. But all in all, it's a balanced budget, and it follows the same professional format that we've had in previous years. I know I drove Tom crazy over the last few months, and so I apologize for that, Thomas, on certain things that we had to have and certain formatting for the budget document. But it's one of the most important decisions that you make, and it's over a 3-year process.
Good save.
Pardon me?
Mark, just off your computer, good save.
Could be, Mark. Well, my presentation is the first 14 pages. I thought I'd be done like in 5 minutes, but I'm going to do about 3 times as long. It started at 7:30.
There's a couple of pennies. And I rushed to get I promise you guys will do just a couple of pennies for your time.
There is a special meeting this coming Wednesday evening based on council direction, and clerk has some material to hand out relative to that meeting. There's 2 memos, both written by myself. One pertains to the interim city manager, possible selection candidates. The other pertains to the methodology to obtain a full-time city manager through a recruitment firm, and we'll be looking for your direction on both those items this coming Wednesday. And then you got those to hand out, or did we hand it out already?
Mr. Robertson.
Okay, good. I've got nothing else to say until the screen comes on. Hey, I'm going to say the 3rd inning instead of the bottom of the 2nd.
What's that?
Top of the 3rd inning instead of the bottom of the 2nd.
It's not gonna happen. I have a feeling. Like to keep their season right.
Oh, okay. Okay.
9:30.
You got the Canon arms?
There we go.
Right button. Right button. Okay. Well, I apologize for the 8-minute delay. And as I was saying, this is the first time that we have 4 new members of council for the first budget session, and I thought I would bring you in the mix a little bit early. So, Mr. Teets, if you could please read the first slide.
Are you serious? Oh. Overview of budgets and general fund and special revenue and internal service and debt service funds on April 23rd. April 30th, the capital projects, enterprise funds, 3-year budget and wrap-up, and then May 7th, public hearing and adoption.
Excellent, thank you. Of course, after each overview and fund presentation. We'll take any questions that you have and be happy to answer them. If we can't answer them in real time and we have to come back and do some research, we'll have an answer for you sometime during the week. Okay? Great. Mr. Henderson, this is slides for you.
We are doing this. Vision to honor the legacy of the past and build a strong, vibrant future and be an attractive place to live, work, and grow a business.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell?
You got a pretty short one. Provide a safe, clean, and livable city. Provide effective, efficient local government. Build a sense of community. Attract and retain business investment.
Thank you. And Mayor, I'll come back to you. This is a little bit long here, but
Thank you.
what we have is an organizational chart that is pretty much in conjunction with what the International City Management Association had recommended for our restructuring process. Obviously the citizens elect a city council, mayor and council. The council essentially has 2 employees that report directly to them. Mrs. Lori Bloom, the city attorney, and myself as your city manager. Underneath me is the assistant to the city manager, which is Monica Ireland. Monica is also in charge of continuous improvement. That was also another ICMA recommendation. And then we have the manager's office coordinator, which is Beth Tashnik. In terms of the department heads that report directly to me, Fire Department, which is Chief Nelson. Chief Nelson is here. Police Chief is Gary Mayer, who's also here. Our Public Works Director is Tim Richnack. HR Director is Peggy Sears. The Acting Director of Financial Services is Tom Darling, a little over a year now, Tom. Our City Clerk is Eileen Bittner. And the Director of Economic and Community Development is Mark Miller. Mark used to be the Assistant Manager, but he was redeployed in accordance with the ICMA recommendations. In fact, this position used to have 2 assistant managers. Now it has none. Also, for the staff members, I have Captain Keith Fry. I have Captain Link, Jerry Sherlink, I'm sorry. Our assessor is Nino Lacari. Nino helped a lot with our projections. I've already introduced Chief Nelson. Steve Bandetta is our city engineer. Bill Hootery is our traffic engineer and also deputy city engineer. Susan Learstein is our director of purchasing, and she's here part-time. She retired and came back part-time. We're going to try to fill that position with a full-time position, hopefully before the year is out, right, Susan? That's as long as she said she would stay. Jeff Bigler is our Director of Recreation, who works for Mark. Our librarian is Miss Kathy Russ. And I've introduced everybody else down the chain. I think in the corner there is Wendell Moore. Is that Wendell? Okay, there you go. I just hired for it, Wendell. But this is the organizational chart that we have for the city of Troy. Okay, there was, I wanted to just briefly talk about some of the best practices that we had in cost-saving measures in the past. There's an old saying you may have heard of. It says, "He who lives in the past robs the present, but he who ignores the past robs the future." Has anybody ever heard that saying before? Do you know who said it? Okay, did you ever watch the Kung Fu program years ago? Master Po said that to Grasshopper. I like it. The line stuck in my mind. I just, it's true. But it's important that we don't ignore some of the best practices that we've already achieved in cost-saving measures. And when I say ICMA, I mean the International City Management Association. They took a look at us about 2 years ago at our efficiencies, including salaries and benefits, and many of the recommendations that they made were already in place. They just complimented us for making those in advance. But they took a look at our salaries and benefits. They stated that we are comparable to cities of similar sizes and that measures to contain these costs are leading edge practices. And all this is on our website in more detail. They also reported our efforts to outsource and privatize services such as building inspection and golf course mirrors leading practices found across the nation. Employees have responded well to the budget crisis and have contributed innovative solutions for improving efficiencies. And they confirmed that we are on track following sound management plans to effect positive change and continue our quality services. That's one reason that I brought back Monica Ireland, who's doing a great job for us and always looking for ways to enhance our service delivery venues for the most cost-efficient levels. People talk about percentages here and percentages there. They can be very misleading. Between October 2009 and June 2011, we reduced our actual payroll by more than $8 million, or 26%. We reduced our workforce by 172 full-time employees. That's 35% in the past 6 years. Now, it's not a best practice to just whack employees. Where the best practice comes in is trying to still have a good level of service with the reduction of your employees. Unlike the private sector, when demand goes down, employees are cut. If we made pizzas and there wasn't a demand for pizzas, we'd cut our employees to fit the number of people to make pizzas to meet the demand. In the public sector, when the economy gets bad, demand goes up. Demand goes up for police services, demand goes up for recreation services, demand goes up for infrastructure maintenance and blight enforcement. All employees agreed to a 10% concession, and I've been saying this now for 2 years because it's true. I can't find another municipal or county or state organization anywhere where all employees have conceded at least 10%. So I've had a challenge out there to everyone. If you can find another community or county or state, please advise. We're also among government leaders in managing our benefit costs. Our defined benefit plan has been replaced with a defined contribution plan for new hires. That essentially took place beginning in 1997. We now have less than 20% of our full-time employees in defined benefit. Retiree health care was replaced with retiree health savings plan, which is very similar to a defined contribution plan for health insurance. I'm not going to read everything. You can take a look at it at your leisure, but it does list a host of best practices that we have had. Also, if you want to take a look at the sessions on a per employee group basis, we have 6 collective bargaining units as well as 2 non-union employees classified and exempt. And this talks about the concessions that they gave with more specificity going back to 2010. Again, I'm not going to read all of these, but if you have any questions later on, we'll be happy to respond. Well, the top of the screen says examples of city services that are no longer provided, and then there's a question mark, or are limited in scope. The question mark should be gone, but to answer the question, the answer is yes. And what we've done is there is no longer police protection in local schools. Police assistance and ambulance runs are no longer provided unless there's a consecutive police matter or it is life-threatening. Fire education programs for businesses, dog licensing, and any animal control services, those are gone to the county now. Financial support to local groups, including youth programs that keep kids off drugs and off the streets. Community events, a lot of recreational programming. I think now, Jeff, we're pretty much pay-as-you-go. User pays, and then we provide the program. As well as reduced programming at the Nature Center, Library, and Museum. Okay, this is a snapshot of general fund revenue and expenditures without the use of fund balance over the past several years. The x-axis, or the up and down column, are numbers in the millions, and the y-axis, or the time continuum, is on the bottom. The revenues are in blue, and expenditures are in red. And whenever you see a red line, over a blue line, that means you had to utilize this area in the center here as a fund balance, which was reduced in those years. When you have a blue line that's higher than a red line, that means you added to the fund balance, okay? So in 2011-12, or 2012, that ends June 30th, we're going to add about $1.9 million to our fund balance. And that's almost exclusively thanks to the employees that get concessions, as well as the reduction in staff and the early retirement incentive program, which was determined by our actuaries to be cost efficient to the organization. Now, having said this, there's going to be a change to this line. The EMS portion of about $500,000 was left out of the draft document. We have to put that back in there. Our apologies. So it's not going to affect the fund balance at the end of this fiscal year, but about $500,000 needs to be added to the fire department for subsequent years. And there's been a handout that came from Mr. Darling. There should be a table that shows what the differences is between the amended and unassigned fund balances with that $500,000 incorporated in the chart as well. All right. So what does this mean? It means that we're going to add to our fund balance this year, and the next 3 years are going to take from the fund balance. In terms of our personnel summary, our high point was 2006. These are full-time equivalent employees, right? And our high point was 485 employees. We're down to, this coming fiscal year, 319. And a lot of organizations try to benchmark the number of employees per population as a sense of how many employees that we have in terms of benchmark. I don't personally believe in that because it depends on your level of service, but it's a chart that we've always put in here before, and it looks like this. In 2003, we had 5.81 employees per 1,000 population. We're going down to 4.3 in 2012, and then 3.9 in 2013. Now, this recap, I believe, is for fiscal year 2013. Is that correct? And there's a net of 29 full-time positions that are slated for elimination. And they're shown here in engineering, planning, recreation, police. Fortunately, in the police department, the ERIP program took effect of the actions against one police officers. Is that correct, Chief? Yes, sir. And then we have additions. Secretary 2 is HR and the additional parts. And these are also included in the ICMA report, I believe, Peggy, to achieve sustainability. Now, before I turn this over to Tom, any questions so far? Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't you have Mary read the description of the budget document?
I'll try and savor that effort. Unless you would like to, go ahead.
Well, it's only a fitting, Thomas.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, would you do us the honor?
Absolutely. Description of the budget document. It's an operations guide, it's a financial plan, and it's a communication device that integrates outcomes with resources and identifies budget policies.
Great, excellent, thank you. As an operation guide, really it lays the framework for all of our departments, doesn't it? It is a guide for each one of our departments to live within for the fiscal year. It also provides financial guidance to management and staff as they go through their annual expenditure routines. As a financial plan, it's really a tool to monitor our financial activity, right? We always compare what's budget to actual to kind of gauge how we're doing through the year. It also is a way that we establish our levels of service. What levels of service do we want to provide to our residents? And it also acts as a way for us to manage our financial strength as a city. My mad PowerPoint presentation skills here. Let's go ahead and look at the 2012 budget as compared to the 2013 budget. From the general fund itself, we've reduced general fund expenditures by about 8.5% or $4.7 million from what was budgeted for the general fund in the 2012 budget. Your capital fund was reduced by another 30.3% or $7.8 million. Those are your two main funds as far as what's supported by property taxes. If we combine all the other funds, which is typically water, sewer, your enterprise funds, the funds that are supported by charges for services, there's an increase of about 5.7% or about $3.4 million. This is really directly related to, and we'll talk about this next week, is increase in our water rates and sewer rates as established by the Detroit Water and the Oakland County Sewage Disposal System, and they increased about 8%. So by only increasing about 5.7% shows that we're making some headway there also. Some of the other budget highlights, again, a $4.7 million or 8.5% decrease was budgeted for the general fund. We did budget $18 million for capital expenditures and infrastructure improvements in the capital projects fund. The debt service funds are going to include funding for all the voter-approved 1999 bond issues. Again, the budgetary accounting for employees and wages, really your major expenditures are wages and benefits. When we budget for those, what you would call position budget, or kind of like a zero-based budgeting type format. And basically, we start with zero and we account for every wage and benefit that employee would earn and compile that up. We've expanded the capital fund section by providing some project narratives, some maintenance costs, and some operational cost savings. We'll get to that section. All right, so that's kind of an overview. Let's talk about the general fund specifically. Again, for the 2013 budget, the budget as established is budgeted to utilize about $492,000 of fund balance. This is opposed to the 2012 budget, which was budgeted to use about $2.5 million of fund balance. So not only are we not going to use fund balance for 2012 fiscal year, but we've significantly reduced the reliance on fund balance for our 2013 budget. Unassigned fund balance is going to be estimated at about $11.9 million, or 23.5% of your general fund expenditures. Again, this is at the end of 2013. Again, I need to stress that these are estimates. We won't know what we're going to be like at the end of 2012 until we go through the audit. But projections right now are favorable at an increase of about $1.9 million, which, as you'll see later, we may need. Okay, all 29 net full-time positions, as you noticed before from Mr. Zerlag's screen, are out of the general fund. It should be noted that there is no budget for a transfer from the Budget Stabilization Fund. In previous years, in 2012, you budgeted a $300,000 transfer to help stabilize tax rates and services for the general fund. Not only are we not going to transfer that money from the stabilization fund to the general fund, but we're not going to budget such a transfer for 2013 either. It also should be noted that in your 2012 budget, you budgeted a $1.5 million transfer from the Capital Project Fund, again to stabilize services in the general fund for those core type of services such as public safety. Again, we are not going to make that transfer. We don't believe that financially we need to for 2012, nor are we going to budget such a transfer for 2013. Okay, so those are two very positive things. Next, let's talk about the revenue sources for the general fund. It should be noted that really about 59.3% of our funding comes from property taxes. Another 12.9% comes from charges for services. So combined together, that's over 72% of the general fund's funding comes from either our property taxes or our charges for services rendered. It should also be noted that there's a large change from the prior year from other financing sources. This 10.2% was about 17.2%. And that is really, what that means was the utilization of fund balance in prior years. We've really reduced that because, again, as I mentioned earlier, you were budgeted to use about 2.4 million or 2.5 million in 2012 that you will not be using. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about general fund expenditures. Taxes are budgeted for a reduction of about 1.66%. Licenses and permits, again, are reducing by about 6%. Other big ones are your fines and forfeitures of about 30%, and operating transfers in of about 51.6%. So let's talk a little bit about each one of these. Again, property taxes are budgeted to decline because of the reduction in taxable value for the general fund. We have a decrease in taxable value, which we'll get into a little bit earlier, but again, that's going to result in a decrease in our tax revenue. Licenses and permits are really related to mechanical and electrical permits. Really what we're budgeting this year is coming, for 2013, is really coming closer to what we're projecting. The other big things is your fines and forfeitures, this 30%. The reason that this is so low is because we've established a new special revenue fund for your drug forfeiture fund. So instead of those revenues going to the general fund, they will be going to the special revenue fund that we've established to fund those type of police training and specified capital type expenditures that drug forfeitures can only be used for. Okay? But that's why you see that reduction, because they're not going to the general fund this year. And again, the operating transfers in are significantly reduced, again, because we're not budgeting the use of fund balance to the extent that we did in 2012. Should be noted that, let's go back. Let's go back. There we go. It should be noted that 74% of our budgeting sources, of our revenue sources, 74% of our revenue sources are declining. All right, so let's look at property taxes specifically. Basically what you have here is for 2013, the average residential home is valued at $97,742. That's actually an increase, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, in value of around nearly $1,000, like $968, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Based on this property, in any of our other surrounding communities, this is the estimate of what you would be paying for property taxes. Again, it should be noted that we are well below any other full-service type communities. In fact, our nearest one, which is Royal Oak, we're clearly $324 less than what you would pay for the same assessed value type home in a different community. Here is the, based on those property taxes, here is basically a few years going back. Again, the 1,024, which is budgeted for 2013, is up from the 2012 level, which is, again, made of two components. As we know, it's millage rate time assessed value. We do have an increase, a proposed increase in the millage rate for just the refuge fund and the debt service fund, which we'll talk about later, which really accounts for about $28 in the difference between the 2012 and 2013 projected property taxes. The other $10 is based on the increase of the taxable value of that home. Again, going back, here is, we're going to start talking about real taxes and personal taxes. As you can see, there's a lot of red on this chart, but there is a couple things to note. Again, our real taxes are projected for 2013 to go down another 2.6%. In total, that includes both residential and commercial combined. However, it should be noted that our personal property taxes actually increased for the first time in several years by about 2.2%. And of course, as you know, you've heard from the state that they're looking at eliminating personal property taxes. So, but that's a different story for a different setting. So all in all, basically, our assessed values have gone down from from our taxable value has gone down about 2.19% in total. And as you can see, at least it's starting to slow down. I guess for economics would say our level of decrease is decreasing, right? Because again, we were down about 10.2% in 2011, another 6.8% in 2012. So again, it seems to be coming around. So again, let's kind of look again the difference between real and personal taxes. As you can see, we've been on a steady decline in real taxes. Again, about 2.19% decrease overall. Personal property taxes, which is really about 8.5 to 10% of our property taxes, or the value of our property taxes, showing a slight increase, again, about 2.2%. So, but it's been pretty level throughout the years. Let's take a closer look at our real taxes. Again, the upper one is our residential. We've seen significant decline since 2007. Again, it actually leveled out, and we actually had a slight increase of a 0.42% increase in our residential values. Again, as I showed you in that earlier slide, the average residential home went up about $968 for the year. Okay. However, that's being offset by the large decline in, see, I keep using the wrong thing. There, that's a pointer. It's our large decrease in our commercial. Commercial is still declining, and it's expected to decline in at least through the end of this decade. There's a little, again, here's our personal property taxes that we talked a little bit about, that they've been declining for several years, but they've kind of held up in a slight increase for this year. This industrial is a misnomer. I do believe that's right, isn't it? It looks like there is a slight increase here, but the issue is the state of Michigan reclassed commercial property to industrial and then reversed it. So even though that shows like, hey, industrial is coming back, that's not the case. It was a reclass of what they consider commercial property to industrial, which made it look like that. I think, again, Mr. Riccardi, they since reversed that.
They reversed it this year. You'll see later on that it looks like there's a 25% increase in commercial property. Well, it has nothing to do with the market value. It just has to do with reclassifying the property. They got sued over the classification issue. They capitulated and changed all those properties back to commercial. Last year's budget showed a huge drop in commercial. Well, now it's all back.
It should also be noted, too, that the city has a lot of Michigan Tax Tribunal cases out there that are yet to be legislated. A lot of them are coming up, and we have budgeted for a significant portion of that. But as it stands, right now we got about 142 $0.6 million of disputed tax legislation out there. Typically, our reduced levels are about 59%. We realize about 59% of that. So from a dollar standpoint, there's about $858,000 of tax tribunals that we could possibly realize. Again, we budgeted for those, but it should be noted that they're out there.
Did you say 142.6 million?
Yes.
Outstanding?
Yeah, of the value.
Of the value.
Of the value. Which relates in, if we're thinking about dollars, 858,000. Okay. Again, these go several years back that are coming due, back from what, 2009?
Nine.
I have a quick question about that slide as well.
Yes.
You account for some of the uptick in the industrial as a reclassification, but no contribution for the commercial downtick for the same reason.
Well, again, yeah, if I was going to look at that, your commercial probably didn't go down that steep.
Because of the reclassification.
Right, because of the reclass. So they both went down. The bottom line is they both went down.
Correct.
But your commercial probably didn't go down to that degree, or would you like to?
Yeah, the commercial property technically went down about 10%, industrial dropped about 15%. Industrial had the larger decrease this year. So the chart's a little misleading.
Right.
But
This is
yeah,
showing
overall,
that-
commercial was 10%, industrial was 15% reduction.
This is showing about a 28% reduction as it stands. And again, that's
The
reported
rest of
as
that
it
is
was as of
reclassification.
2013, right. Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and talk just briefly about assessed value and taxable value. Basically, what this chart's trying to tell you is 100% would be your assessed value. You can never tax over 100% of assessed. So therefore, as taxable value gets closer to the 100%, again, we're 97.8%, any decrease in assessed value will have a direct relationship for a decrease in taxable value. As far as increases go, taxable value can only increase the lower of CPI or 5%. So even if we enjoyed a great appreciation in our homes and they skyrocketed 6-7% a year, it would take a long time for us to catch up with taxable value based on, again, on Proposal A, which limits us to the lower of CPI or 5% in any particular year. Let's talk about then the mix of our taxable value. Typically, the city always, the goal is that we always had a proportionate amount of residential versus commercial. 50-50 was the idea, is that we want, of our assessed value, of our taxable value, 50% was from residential, 50% was from commercial. As we can see in through the years, that as a percentage of our total, residential has increased, and that's directly related to the decrease in our commercial properties. So from a 50-50 that we were in 2001, residential now accounts for about 61% of our taxable value. Let's go ahead and look at some of the tax millages that are out there for the district. Again, these are estimated, but as it stands, in 2012 we were at 10.19 mils. We're going to be proposing a 10.48 mils, which is a 0.29 mil increase, and again, that's for refuse and debt service only. And we'll be talking about those more specifically a little bit later on. But as of total taxes of 36.51 mils, the city accounts for only 29% of that. Again, we were talking about what would the average resident pay on a home, and again, the 1,024 compared to 986 in 2012. Again, based on two things: the increase in the average residential taxable value and the 0.29 mil increase for refuge and debt service. So if we were looking at a dollar again, 29% of it is for city, 19% of our residents' taxes, property taxes go to the community college and county, and 52% to the local school districts. If you look at our millage rate compared to some of our other communities, again, these are 2011-12 estimates, we are still one of the best values of a full residency that I know of, one of the lowest millages in my experience. Again, 2013 is proposed at 10.48%, but again, 10.48% compared to some of our other neighbors' millage rates is significantly lower.
I have a quick question about that as well.
Yeah.
We show these cities here, but they don't correspond to the comparison you did here. It would be nice to have an apples-to-apples comparison, consistent through the
I
thing.
would
So,
think that, okay, well, I will
Well-
take a look at their,
for example, I just wrote Rochester and Clawson weren't included in this one, but yet Clawson shows
as
up
far
on
as
here.
communities versus.
Yeah, it would be nice to be able to, if we're going to deal apples and apples in all these scenarios, it'd be nice to carry that through the report. So
I will look and see which one wasn't included.
That Clausen that was not included?
yeah, it was Clawson, I think.
I don't think Clausen has a house at that value.
Is it? Yeah, that might be okay. Is that what we're dealing with?
I think that's, no disparagement, but I don't think they have a house at that value.
Right. Okay.
Rochester Hills, what, is that on?
Well,
Yeah,
Rochester
that's
Hills.
on
They're on
both
there.
sides.
Royal Oak is the other one.
Yeah, Royal Oak is dropped from this one.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that so we can do that. Very good, thank you. I'm gonna make a note of that. Okay, so let's take a look at the history and a summary of the millage rates that we're proposing. Again, general fund, we're proposing no increase, 6.5 mils. Again, that's been established since really 2006, that's been level. A refuge fund, we're proposing a 0.09 or 9/100ths of a mil increase for that. Again, we'll talk more about those, but it's primarily due to, obviously, the decrease in our taxable values, but more importantly, the increases that it's going to cost us to have these services. Most of those services are contracted services, in fact, they all are, and they all have a CPI index and a gas multiplier in them. So, again, lower taxable value combined with higher costs are generating, again, 9/100ths of a mil. Again, the library fund is now in there at 0.7 mils. Our capital fund, again, has actually reduced since 2005, and we're still projecting, or at least proposing, a 1.53 mil. That to keep that consistent. Debt service, on that side, we are proposing a 0.2 mil increase for debt service. Debt service over the last few years has taken some significant expenditure over revenue decreases. Again, with the decrease in taxable value, we are required to capture the money to make these debt payments, and that's what this millage is designed to do. Yes, yes, the debt service is just only the voter-approved debt millage, 1999 A, B, and C. Again, we'll talk more about those. Okay, again, the millage rates that we just talked about, really kind of on a graphical representation. Again, we see a lot of stability in the general fund and in the capital fund. Debt really for a long time has been pretty consistent. Again, with a slight increase we're proposing, along with the refuge fund, which actually decreased, as you could tell from the prior year. It actually went down significantly, but over the years has grown again because of the reduction in taxable value and the increase in cost from our contractors. If we look at the millage by charter, which was, I believe, adopted in November of 2008, said, "Thou shalt not have a millage more than 8.1 mils." The Headley rollback at that point was 8.1. Again, we're proposing an 8.03, 6.5 for the general fund, 1.53 for the capital fund, so a total of 8.03 mils. That still leaves available under the city charter of about 7/100ths of a mil. 7/100ths of a mil is about 300,000 in equatable dollars. Refuge collection, the state says the most you can go is 3 mils. Hadley has rolled that back to 2.55 mils. We're proposing a 1.05 mil millage for refuge, leaving available about 1.5 mils for that we are not levying.
If I may, Thomas, a number of years ago, council adopted a policy that, pretty simple, whatever it costs to pick up garbage and dispose of it is what we will charge.
So that's about it for property tax. So let's talk about our next large revenue item, and that's state shared revenue. And as you can see, our good friends at the state have gradually and significantly decreased basically the return of our sales taxes back to our communities. So you hear the term sometimes a donor community. Well, they probably get more sales tax at the state level than they return back to us. And as you can see, over the years, they've significantly decreased that. Again, I'm going to give a conservative budget estimate of around $5.5 million. Again, based on the trends that we've seen from the state in the past. Again, state shared revenues account for about 10% of our total general fund revenues. All right, let's take a look at some good news. General fund balance. General fund balance right now in total at the end of 2012, and I got to tell you, it's an estimate. If our projections come in correctly at the end of 2012, we'd have about $27.9 million of total general fund balance. That's an increase from 2011 projected of $1,952,000. So again, those are projections. We will not know what that number actually is until we get through the audit. Sometimes me and the auditors have different opinions, and they typically win. Okay. Again, if we look at general fund, unassigned fund balance as a percentage of the total fund budget, and there's two things that go, whoops, see, I always hit that wrong button. There we go. Two things that make this up, right? One is the level of your unassigned fund balance in total dollars. The other thing that drives that percentage is our expenditures. So if we had no increase in general fund balance, but our expenditures went down by $4 million, this percentage would go up, right? So we got two things that were really driving this thing this year, and that's why you kind of see a significant increase because of those two factors. Both good things. Okay, finally in the general fund, again, as pointed out, general fund balance for 2013, we budgeted the use of fund balance of about $492,000 to keep us in balance. Again, that's significantly less than it was in prior years of about 2.5. Unassigned fund balance is projected to be above our minimum, or the city's minimum, which was between 10 and 17% of general fund operations, because we're projecting, at least at the end of 13, to have about 11.9 million or 23.5% of unassigned fund balance at the end of 2013. That's the way we budgeted. Again, this shows good financial strength, good stability, and again, the big thing is to stay at the level of services that we've drawn that down to in 2012 and try and be consistent with those levels of services. Well, that's the first question on general fund.
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate all this. I was focusing prior to this meeting on the budget package itself.
Yes.
And there's a page 29 that really gives a great overview of our general fund revenues and expenses, just at the top level. And it was interesting to me to compare where we're estimating to come in 2012 versus our 2012 budget.
Yes.
Okay. So if I look at this, 2012 total revenue, we're coming in with total revenue basically $1 million more than what we had budgeted.
That's correct.
Not really because of taxes, but primarily it looks like because of federal grants we received that we had not budgeted, and some state grants, and some charges for services. So that's good news. We're getting revenue of about $1 million more than we budgeted. Now, skip over the operating transfers in and look at just the expenditures. The other good news is that our expenditures this year are $49,600,000 and change compared to a budget of $55,188,000. So we have less expenditures of $5.6 million.
That's correct.
So you got $1.6 million, $5.6 million less expenditures, $1 million more in revenue. So we've got $6.6 million more. We're better off $6.6 million, or about 12% of our budget. So that's
We had
good.
budgeted for it.
And that's all good news. That's all good stuff. Then, of course, when you take into account the transfers, operating transfers in and out, that reduces down. But the good news is, revenues are up $1 million, and our expenses, estimated 2012, based on what we thought we were going to be, are $5.6 million less.
That's right. That's right.
That's good. But you can look here really quick and see that the police budget took a hit of almost $4.3 million.
That's right.
Our expenses were lower, and I'm not sure that's a real good thing, but that's one of the major reasons we're there. But I didn't know, you gave a good summary here, but really I thought it might help the council and the audience to talk a little bit about where our budget was for 2012 versus how we expect to come in. Maybe you're getting into that later. I haven't seen it.
Sure. Right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Again, you know, for 2012, we were budgeted to use about $2.5 million in two things. Fund balance of about $2.5 million, a transfer in from capital projects of about $1.5 million, and $300,000 from the budget stabilization fund to make 2012 go round.
I'd like to ask Chief Mayor to explain the reduction of the $4.5 million in the police department. Without waiting on the spot, Chief.
John, could I ask
I didn't know
you a
you were
question?
Sorry, sir.
Could I just follow up on that before you, would that be possible? Because I looked at the exact same thing, and when I looked at that, I said, okay, what's the reason for that? Okay, and if you go back to your presentation, John, on page 15, and I think the public would be looking at this in a completely different light. You know, it's easy to gloss over this, because if the ERIF program had not worked correctly, we would be laying off 26 police officers next year, okay? Because of the ERIF program, we're not laying off one police officer. In fact, we let too many go. So if you take a look at the 26 police officers that we lost, and I think the public would be looking at this completely different had we said we're going to lay police officers off next year. But what we did is they're gone. Okay, the 26 are gone. They're gone a year early. 26 police officers is the reason that Councilman Fleming has pointed out why we are below. And to me, that's not the way you want to do it. Okay, it would have been better to lose the officers, and I said this back in a study session two years ago. It's better to lose 5 and 10 at a time than it is to lose 26 in 1 year. So it's a credit to the police department that they've been able to operate this year with losing 26 police officers in one sweep. And that didn't just include police officers, it included command, it included a captain, and that is the reason, when you look at page 29, that there's a huge amount of money there. That was supposed to be spread over 3 years.
That's right.
Okay? And it's easy to say, okay, we have a fund balance of 23%. If those 26 police officers were factored into that, we would be at about 17%. Okay? So what happened is we're a year ahead.
You're a year ahead.
We're a year ahead. And that's the explanation. Okay? The explanation is very simple. We're a year ahead.
And again, I'll be getting you more
And
details.
I didn't want to butt in on you.
You answered for the chief very well.
But
Councilman.
that's where, I was going to the same spot.
Exactly.
Okay?
We accelerated the layoffs essentially
Exactly.
through the ERIP program.
Exactly.
Again,
And I just wanted to point out too, I think I don't want to say we're lucky, because I think that this was our plan with the ERIP program all along. This is what our goal was, but at the time that we approved this budget last year, we couldn't budget for something that we didn't know how it was going to pan out. So I think that accounts for the difference too. It wasn't just kind of, wow, we're looking at this and this is not what we planned for type thing. This is what we were hoping for. But when we actually had to approve the budget last year, that was a big question mark, because the whole process of the ERIP program and when it would close and people could no longer take advantage of it didn't fall until several months after the budget had to be approved. So we had to budget for what we knew, which was laying off officers in the plan that we had originally set, where it would be less officers per year to reach that goal. So we were budgeting for what we knew. I think many of us that were on council and on city staff and city management were hoping for this result, but there was no way we could approve a budget, with that unknown.
That's correct, because your budget is a financial plan, and when we develop the plan, typically, we develop a plan we can live with, and not a lot of speculation should be involved in that.
Also, on that same page, streets and drains were down about 1.1 million as well.
Yeah. And again, we're going to get into the general fund in detail after the break, but those
Good.
are excellent points.
Okay.
Andrew Zerly, did you want to add something? I saw you.
Thank you. I was going to just add on to what Councilwoman McGinnis indicated. The philosophy on the ERIP program was also extended to the same philosophy with the collective bargaining routes. We wanted to budget, or we wanted to achieve a 10% concession, but until we actually inked a deal, we couldn't budget for it, because we always budget essentially on what is instead of if it comes.
Are there any questions from this side?
At this point.
I have some questions, but I would like to wait until the end of the presentation to see
Okay.
how they fit in.
You want a break, or do you want to keep going?
Break. A little break. 5 minutes?
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break.
Yeah. If
We'll
you
come
want to
back
take a
and dig
5-minute
into
break,
the general fund in a
that's
little
fine.
more detail.
You may be going right.
Journey through the budget by talking about for general fund revenues and expenditures. And we talked a little bit about revenues earlier. Let's talk about some of the expenditures. Again, we'll have a summary by department, centers and object, history by department, and a summary by account in your folders. We're going to kind of take a view from some of the, from basically the 10,000 foot level, and we'll work our way in. Overall, for 2013, we are budgeting expenditures of $50.5 million. Again, that's a decrease of about $4.1 million from the previous years. 2012, we're estimating to come in at about 51.6 in total at the end of the day. Based on this, let's talk about then, what are we doing with that $50.5 million? Again, it has always been the city's priorities, as public safety is the #1 priority. And with that, you can see that over half of our expenditures are related to police and fire at about $27.4 million. Okay, let's talk about then, again, this is one of John's favorite slides because it is relative. But if we took those general fund dollars and applied it against our estimated population for 2013, basically it would amount to about $619 per resident, down from about $668,000 from the prior year. Again, there's two things that go into this. What are you budgeting for expenditures, and what's the population? Okay. General fund expenditure highlight, again, the expenditures reflect the priorities of the city. Total general fund operating budget is down 8.5%. Again, inside the budget, we've incorporated the required funding for our retiree pension and health care benefits. Again, the general fund was one that took the brunt of the 29 full-time position reduction net. Personal services, as a percentage of the budget, continue to decline. Our largest expenditures are typically related to payroll fringe type benefits. Again, we've reduced that for the 2013 budget from what used to be 68% of our total budget down to about 64.4%. Okay? And as mentioned earlier, Councilman Fleming and that the police budget was reduced by about 17.8%. Again, we reduced the budget by about 17.8% for police, but while at the same time maintaining the 4 officers that were slated to be removed through our option 1 budget from the prior year, but were maintained based on the ICMA's sustainability recommendations. So not only were we able to reduce it by 17.8%, but we were also able to maintain 4 officers to maintain stability in our police department. Again, just in total, if you look at percentages, you can see that over the last few years, from our total budget, personal services has been reduced significantly through the years. Of course, when one goes down, others go up. But again, our biggest costs are in personal services.
Now, Tom, is it true that some cities have a personal service cost upwards of 75%?
There are many that are significantly higher than what you have here. In fact, most of them, I would believe, are at least in the upper 60s, if not lower 70s. Again, I'm not a big proponent that you can compare one city to the other. Who knows, without digging what's in their personnel and fringe costs, but they're typically significantly higher than 64%, what I've seen in my experience. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about our expenditures compared to the prior year. Again, personal services, we're budgeting for 2013 to be less than 2012 by almost $5 million, or a reduction in our personal services of 13.3%. Supplies are being reduced by about $25,000 or 1%. Our other service charges are actually budgeted to increase by about $134,000 or 0.9%, and that's really directly related to tax refunds. Okay, and so we've got a significant amount more in tax refunds in this year's budget than we did in prior years. In fact, if I'd have to look, but I believe it's, if you want, give me a minute, I'll get back with you on what those tax refunds are, but it's a significant amount more than we had in prior years.
Is that because of tribunal?
Yes, those MTTs that we talked about. In 2012, I know this off the top, it was about 200,000, and I think I'm about 576,000. Oh, I'm sorry, 347,000.
And how many years does that take to get through the process? So we have a settlement at the tribunal?
Well, they all come up, right? Maybe you can answer them, or I know we've gone from 2009 going back, but you know, it may not be all of 2009's for this year. You know, they keep.
Yeah, in general, the appeals date back to 2009. That was the largest year. We had 400 appeals that year. The year previous to that, we had 40. They don't all get heard at the same time, obviously. Many of them are 2-3 years in arrears. So when you go to the court, you're appealing the 2009, the 2010, the 2011. There's still about 60 of them out there where they'll add the 2012 year to those. The problem is when the decision is rendered, you have to pay up all 4 years at one time. The city is only responsible for the current year from our fund, but what happens is the county handles the previous year's refunds. They bill us back for those. It comes out of our tax proceeds for the current year. So yeah, you can pay 4 years at one time on one decision.
Again, we've budgeted about 547,000, so net of that 134,000, we're still, from everything else, we're still reduced our budget for other services. We have a transfer out of the general fund this year of $206,000. What that is, that's our estimated balance of our drug forfeiture funds that are currently housed in the general fund. Again, as we spoke earlier, we're going to create a separate special revenue fund for our drug forfeiture funds. And again, it helps show our compliance with these drug forfeiture monies, as they can only be spent for a specific type of items. Okay, here is basically our bargaining agreements and the number of employees and the expiration date. Again, we have some coming up for our ASME, our MAP, and our TFSOA are coming up in 2013. Our TPOA, which is our largest, that bargaining agreement still stands till 2015. Talk about supplies. Again, it's mentioned earlier, supplies are budgeted for a decrease of around $25,000 or 1%. Office supplies increased by about $3,000 or 1%. Operating supplies are reduced by $89,490 or 7.8%, primarily related to police type supplies in uniforms. Repairs and maintenance went up about $1.8 thousand or 6.7%, and that's primarily related to maintenance that's being required in the Parks and Recreation departments. And as I mentioned earlier, our other services have increased about $134,000, but of that we were able to reduce our contractual services by about $133,000, public utilities by about $79,000, our rentals by about $129,000 or 4.9%. But again, you know, the tone of the day are the tax refunds, about $347,000 increase. So it's a total budget of about $547,000 for 2013. That would directly relate to the general fund. Okay, I think, yes, that is it for the general fund. Any questions on the general fund?
Or
Again, I'd
about
like to
any-
hold off my questions
Or
till
about
the
any
end.
departments that pertain to the general fund. Now is the time, council decides the protocol, but now is the time when the governing body would talk about the general fund, and then we'll attempt to answer any questions about the general fund. And if we can't answer them today, then we'll come back and we'll have a written response during the week.
Looking back at page 29 again, because I really like that page.
Page 29?
But, when I was looking through here, one of the things that jumped out at me, and maybe the public would like to hear, why is the library still meant to have line items in the general fund?
Why does the library, okay. Well, what you see, what says library and museum is really just the museum.
Right, and I know that, and I'm just thinking it might be best
To articulate that.
to take the word library out of.
Well, again, you're looking at a history, right? Because in 2009, the library was
articulate
there.
it somehow or other, because it looks like we're appropriating money. When you look through this whole document, it does look like we're appropriating money at certain times with the word library.
Again, yeah, it's kind of, I guess we can make a footnote at the bottom that's beginning in 2012, it's only the historic village. Would that,
Because when you see 119,686 for 2013 budget under that line item, that's just for the museum.
that's correct. That's correct. Yeah, again, yeah, it gets a little hard when you've got several years where sometimes it's included, sometimes it's not. But I think that's a great suggestion. So why don't we asterisk that in the final version, and we'll put a memo that it only includes the historic village starting in 2012. I'm sorry, 2011. 11, 12. Actually, 2012. Just 2012.